don't know why I'm looking at my watch, Johnny, but we're approximately 9 years into the craft beer channel. The craft beer channel, and I'm asking you this question. What even is craft beer?
So a couple of days ago, I was asked, for the first time in a long time, what is craft beer? And I didn't actually have an answer for that person. And I think that if even we can't answer that, it's time we had a little chat.
It's a hard thing to define, and I think it maybe it changes and ebbs and flows over time. And
Craft is a bit like art. It's like, you kind of know it when you see it, but if you ask somebody define art, they're like, well, it's...
yeah,
Well, I mean, you're an artist.
it's a very subjective subject, mate. It's maybe it's inquantifiable, but I don't think it is. I think we're going to get to the bottom of it.
I think we are? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my method for this is that I've got 5 beers here that I think you could make a valid argument as to being craft.
Right.
What I haven't included is what I think is definitely not art, definitely not craft, which is like macro light lager. Not that you can't enjoy those beers, but you know they are a commercial process that's been condensed down in the name of capitalism to be as profitable, as clean, and as broadly appealing as possible. And I don't think that much art or craft should be broadly appealing and all about profit. Probably the first point that we should make, like craft should, like goodness, quality should never be in the definition of craft, because if you've drunk craft beer, you've probably had some terrible ones.
Oh yeah.
And if you've drunk macro beer, like Pilsner Urquell, Budvar, Augustina, Paulaner, these are good beers.
Oh yeah.
So quality can't be within our definition. What I have got here is 5 beers where we could make that argument, and I suggest we start with the end where it's pretty clear it's craft.
Yes.
And then see what we learn as we get further and further away from what I think in most people's minds is craft, and see if we find our red line. So this is our definitely category.
Right. Okay. I'm already looking at the label from an art perspective, Johnny.
I mean, yeah.
This looks very craft. Very, very craft.
So this is a double IPA.
Yes.
Just about the craftiest of the styles.
Yeah.
It's from Verdant, one of the best brewers of double IPA, and a collaboration as well, which is not something you generally see in the macro
Who are they
world.
collabing with, Johnny?
They're collaborating with Flock, who are down your way in Kent.
Yeah, chef's kiss. I'm giving a chef's kiss already because 2 very, very cool breweries, a very cool style of beer, great can artwork. This is hitting all the bases for me visually. And kind of like my ideas of what craft beer is thus far, Johnny, before I've even put it in my mouth. Look at that, hazy as well.
Yeah, is hazy part of the definition? No, it can't be.
No.
It can't be. Good Lord.
Whoa.
Verdant never disappoint on the absurdly apricot-y juiciness.
What a bomb.
Oh my God. So this is a stunning, bold... I wouldn't say it's quite experimental, like this has been done a lot of times before. For a decade we've been making these beers, but it is very much on the edges of experimentation for beer. It's right just before we go into absolute crazy land. It's an 8.5%, probably 20, 25, maybe even 30 grams per litre of hop.
Yes.
They'd have taken their time over it. They probably have had to have conditioned it for a long time. So everything they've done is to make the tastiest beverage, like not profit be damned, but price be damned.
Price be damned.
They just want to make the absolute biggest, boldest beer they can, which I think is very craft.
We're making a statement beer here. We're playful, we're experimenting, we're collaborating, we're sharing, we're experimenting.
And trying to make an experience.
So there's a romance, there's an excitement to this kind of beer that comes from that playful nature, that going the extra bag of hops in there. The extra mile they've gone and,
Yeah, and it's a story to tell, and the beer can speak for itself.
Yeah.
As well as a result of that.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
So craft is exciting.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we've talked about how craft beer should be exciting, potentially constantly changing.
Yes.
But now we're going to blow that out of the water by drinking a beer that hasn't really changed for 40-ish years.
Wow.
Getting on for 40 years. Which is the I guess in some ways the granddaddy of craft.
It's Sierra Nevada, mate. Pale Ale. I guess we could say they started the whole thing, right? First wave of American craft beer breweries. And they're the last one standing at this
Exactly. Yeah, they're probably the only one of that guard around the 1980s that's still independent. I love what they put on the labels, which is family owned, operated, and argued over. So yeah, I mean, this back in the day would have been pretty experimental.
Yeah.
They were using Cascade hops, which weren't really used on any kind of commercial scale back then, because they were getting amazing like grapefruity pine kind of aromas out of it.
Yes.
And you know, if you look up, there's lots of videos, lots of interviews with the founders, the Grossmans, and you talk about them trying to persuade people that this is tasty beer. That was incredibly tough. So back then it was craft. There's two things that we should consider here. One is the volume. And as far as I'm concerned, the volume doesn't matter to me. No. I think so long as the actual liquid is still within the bounds of where we're going to end up, does it matter how much you make? Craft doesn't have to be small.
Doesn't need to be constantly evolving, constantly changing, like this first beer we had. I think there's room for craft to be iconic and a stalwart.
So what would you say? So obviously, I mean, Sierra Nevada still make lots of like seasonal, small batches of seasonals and annuals. Can a brewery produce craft and non-craft beer? Or is the craft at the brewery level?
I feel like the craft is the mindset.
Oh my God.
Right? So I think that a craft brewery can make a non-craft beer, but an institution that is a non-craft brewery, so like a Macro or someone, they can't make a craft beer because their processes, their way of thinking isn't a craft approach.
Which sounds kind of mad, but it does reinforce our idea when we said it can't be about how good the beer is. Because, you know, a Macro brewery could make a really good beer.
Yes.
But has it been done with craft intentions? Is craft an intention? I don't know. But it that feels right. It's like you can be a big brewery making great beer, still doesn't make you craft.
100%.
I feel like we're no closer. Should we do the next beer?
Let's do it.
So we tied ourselves in knots with these two. This is where it's going to get really complicated. So we're verging into probably can't be craft territory.
Okay.
And we're going to start with Duvel.
Interesting.
So this is, you know, quite a heritage brand. You know, this beer is about 70 years old. The brewery itself is much older than that. It's a Belgian strong. You know, it's a legit traditional Belgian style.
Yeah.
So can traditional heritage brands be craft if, you know, as we've talked about, the amount of care and the intention is to make the absolute best beer that you possibly can?
Very interesting, Johnny.
I like that I get to ask the questions in this one, and you're just like, I don't know.
What you've done there is you've given us a beer proposition that was invented before the terminology of craft beer was commonplace.
Yes, we're trying to overlay it retrospectively.
Would Duvel consider themselves craft beer? They consider themselves a Belgian...
I mean, see, this is why we need a definition, because everybody considers themselves craft now. I'm pretty sure Foster's on the ring says handcrafted.
Oh my God.
You know? The hand pushed the button. No disrespect, some disrespect to Foster's. A hand pushed the button. But, I mean, this would be, I guess, button pushed. You know? So at this point, we're full automation.
Yes.
You know, here... They might, you know, when we were at Allagash, which is a big brewery, they were still doing stuff by hand.
Yeah.
This, I think we're at full automation at this point. If it's all machines and it's made by a brewery that owns other breweries and is giant and has been embroiled in some controversies in its homeland of Belgium, can you still be craft? Also, was it always that clear?
That is very clear, isn't it? The beer's clear, but the whole discussion is
discussion is not getting
hazier.
murky. Yeah,
very murky, Johnny. It's so tricky.
Is it experimental enough, or was it experimental enough?
I guess.
Is it less experimental now, but iconic now?
Yeah.
And the real question, which I think is both of those things, but can it be that way if it's owned by a very big brewery, done by pushing buttons? And some people would tell you this beer has changed a lot. I don't think I've ever met anybody that said this beer has changed.
I think if we're sort of dealing with a sort of timeline of the human species and civilization and everything, isn't this a matter of perspective? So if we step backwards from the timeline and we just look a little bit wider, at one point this was was craft. This was innovative. This probably changed the world. This beer, along with a lot of the other Belgian beers. So if we sort of step back and have a little bit of a wider perspective, it could potentially be craft, I think.
Such a politician's answer. I would call Duvel craft.
Yeah, okay.
I would. I think the proof is there in the liquid. Mm-hmm. I think that the proof is there in the heritage, the influence, the icon.
Yes.
I think that it doesn't matter if it's machines doing it. I think people would be really surprised drinking their favourite beers how many of them are button-pushing breweries.
Yeah.
You know, the amount of automation in there is incredible.
Yes.
And, you know, when we were at the Alchemist and he said, you know, you've got to sweat making beer, I really love that philosophy, but I don't think that's part of the definition of craft. I think it's a brilliant philosophy and probably does help, you know, if you know your ingredients inside out, all this kind of stuff. But I don't think it's part of the craft definition.
No, I think it is for John Kimmich, and that is what defines craft for him. It's the labouring, it's the intensity of actually loading ingredients in as a human being and being hands-on with the labour.
Which is where like craft gets tied in with like artisan. Like I feel like an artisan has to work with their hands. I don't think a craft brewer has to.
So it can be craft, but it doesn't necessarily have to be artisan.
Yeah, I think artisan's the next step along, where it's, you know, you might have built the brewery yourself.
Yeah, it might be like wild beers in you know, that are in not a log cabin, but like a barn.
That'd be very dangerous.
Not a log cabin, yeah.
Just have some open fires in a log cabin.
Don't do that.
That's why Munich burned to the ground like three times in its history. So I think we're taking baby steps towards a definition. I think we've got it's a long walk. People have tried this before. I don't know if you've noticed. So now we're going to move another step along the gradient to Timothy Taylor's Landlord, a previous champion beer of Britain. When craft beer first came along, it defined itself, certainly in America, against like macro light lager.
Yes.
In the UK, I think it was also defining itself a little bit against cask beer.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you think that's fair?
I think whenever you want to disrupt a market, you come into it and you go, I'm really different. I'm the new hot shit. I'm the new jazz, Johnny.
You're the new jazz.
I'm the new jazz. I'm the new cool thing to listen to. You want to try my beer because it's different from everything else you've ever tried.
Cask Ale has always had this reputation, rightly or wrongly, for trad, slightly dull, often quite low quality, because that's the way that, I mean, we won't get into why cask beer has struggled, but it was not seen as something you wanted to be associated with. But increasingly, craft breweries are producing cask. Verdant now have cask lines at their tap room. We've done videos on a whole series trying to save cask. For me, they're not mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. So you can be a craft cask brewery. And I would probably say that Timothy Taylor's is still a craft brewery.
Interesting.
But I think this is where my red line is going to be here, because they're big scale, but we don't necessarily think that's an issue. Yeah. The recipe hasn't changed for a long time, but it does kind of have iconic status.
Yeah.
But the main reason I struggle with the really big cask breweries is because I do think a lot of them have changed their recipes, have dialed it back. This is as murky, even though it's lovely and crystal clear, it's as murky as it gets for me, like big cask. I consider all small cask ale brewers craft.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And we've lost some of them recently, which breaks my heart.
Exactly. Even the bad cask brewers, it's still a real big shame when they close, because it's such an important part of our culture. And I think that craft beer, there could be a cultural angle to that definition. Here, you know, they're massive. They probably have made some compromises. These guys have also been part of a little conglomerate of breweries trying to increase the taxes for smaller breweries.
Yeah.
I say smaller breweries. They are not smaller breweries. Smaller breweries. So they're not really... If they are craft, they're not acting like it.
No.
But the beer itself, with the ingredients that are used, the processes that are used, the iconic status of some of these beers, I think scrapes them in under the bar. I don't know how we put this down in the definition that we're going to do at the end, but I think it is one. I think it should be in there.
It's a maybe for me. It's a maybe.
It's a maybe.
But I think, they're kind of... I think their mindset isn't necessarily craft.
Right, you're back on the mindset, yeah.
Yeah, because I think the small brewers taxation thing, the issue with that was not a very nice thing to sort of done to
Here first.
their brethren that were smaller than them. So
it's pulling the ladder up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pulling the ladder. It's like, I'm all right, Jack. I'm up here. See you later, boys.
I mean, to be fair to them, they were there before the tax break was given to the small brewers. So they never went up that ladder. They went up some stairs elsewhere. But then they still pulled up the ladder.
Yeah, so I don't get why did they pull the ladder up, Johnny? I don't understand why.
Well, because they're struggling to see a profit on their casks as well.
So they are treading water, maybe philosophically speaking. So they are just sort of looking out for themselves. Yeah. They're looking out for their employees. So maybe that is craft, Johnny.
So Brad can neither confirm nor deny
Look,
that
Johnny,
craft beer is being drunk here.
I might have been at the party, but I had some papers that I had to deliver.
Right.
And I was just...
You were the guy with the red suitcase.
I was just passing through. No, screw those guys.
Right, so this is the last one. As close as we can get to Macro Light Lager.
Yes. Thank you.
While still having some arguments for it being craft.
Yes. Now, this is a beer that is quite close to your heart, isn't it, Johnny?
This was, along with Red Hook IPA, Long Hammer IPA, this was my gateway beer. So I lived minutes from the brewery when it opened. Nice. I used to go to the tap room all the time. Some of my fondest memories of drinking beer are with this brand.
Yeah.
I also think that it's still a really fucking good lager. So the liquid is pretty close to craft. If we're allowing button pushing, we're allowing big volume, we're making allowances for being a bit iconic, and obviously this brewery was one of the most important craft breweries, opened in 2010, opened the doors for a lot of people. Many of the brewers that used to brew here have gone on to found other breweries, other incredible breweries.
And as a branding exercise,
it's just
fantastic.
Exactly.
They haven't really changed in 10 years or however long they've been open.
Exactly. So, but they are owned by the biggest brewery in the world, who I think own about a third of the world's water. That's the scale at which we're talking here.
Johnny, we're getting into James Bond, Quantum of Solace with the water stuff?
Yeah,
this is James Bond bad guy territory now.
Exactly.
I'm getting red flags, mate.
So,
I'm sorry, man. I have to put my foot down.
Yep.
This is over. I like the liquid. This is over the threshold because it's owned by a big, evil James Bond villain company that own a third of the water in the world. Nobody should.
I'm going to have to fact check that for the legals.
They own a lot of water.
I'll ask our lawyer.
Yeah.
I'll ask for a lawyer. I'll ask for a lawyer. Yeah.
Okay. Because it's the race to the bottom, right? How much can you buy a 6-pack for?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's more important than ownership for me. I think, again, I don't think the size of the company is the issue. Yeah. It's kind of what they do with that size. Do they throw that weight around? And, you know, AB InBev have been sued multiple times for anti-competitive practice.
They use it to, I think...
And corruption.
With the volume and the sway that they have, they use it to bully the smaller guys. They can race to the bottom. They can... yeah, exactly. They can have a margin which just destroys everybody else.
Yep.
So you go in your Tesco or wherever and you buy a 6-pack of this for £5.
Do you know what? An interesting point I've never thought of, which is why this video is going to do so well and go viral, but also we're going to get sued by AB InBev, is the fact that this beer, the company that owns this brewery, are probably responsible for huge amounts of shit lager coming out because everybody's trying to compete with that price point.
Right.
You know? So it starts to drag everything down.
So craft, because it's like lowest common denominator and all that kind of jazz as well.
So in a way, the purchase of this actually tries to repair that a little bit. But still, the price point of this, you can buy this in a In fact, you can buy a 6-pack of this in a supermarket for less than 1 can of these.
I know, it hurts. It hurts craft beer, Johnny. So it's not craft beer.
Right. Okay, so like every small corner of the internet about 10 years ago, we're about to try and define craft beer after what we've just learned and after drinking some, 2 very strong beers.
It's only took us 9 years, Joe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and about an hour here. So the first sentence on our definition would be that it's got to be exciting and it's got to push some boundaries.
Yeah, innovative, open to experimentation.
Yeah, and it's got to not give a shit about the bottom line. It's like, if it's going to get expensive, it's going to get expensive.
It's about the quality that's in the can, that's in the bottle, that's in the pint. At the end of the day.
Yeah. Even if you miss, because craft beer doesn't have to be good, even if you miss, it's the intention of creating the best beer possible.
That's it.
Which then leads us to the slight contradiction, which is okay, which is that if it isn't experimental, it's got to have been experimental.
Yes.
You know,
so we have perspective
point,
when we step back in time and we can see how something was significant.
Exactly. So this was daring at the start.
Oh, so
as long as it continues to be as good and have the same intentions, even
craft.
if it's not cutting edge, it's still craft.
Yes.
The volume doesn't matter, it's still the quality and the intention with the liquid.
Yes.
Which I think some people will criticise Duvel for changing their beer, but I think still, I wasn't around at the time when it was different. It's always been delicious to me. So then we come to this. I mean, clearly, craft beer can be cask. Format is absolutely fucking relevant.
100%.
Can, bottle, mini keg, whatever it is, it's still goddamn craft.
So just because this beer predate the terminology of craft beer,
we can retrospectively...
we can offer that. Retrospectively we can go, it's craft.
Yeah. So then what did we learn from this one? We learnt that although ownership probably doesn't matter, as we've sort of discussed with Duvel, what that ownership does with your brand definitely matters. If you're big and you throw your weight around and damage other craft breweries, that you can't be defined as part of that, because it's about intention for us.
It's intention, it's about mindset.
Which means I need to slightly revise, I think, a little bit. I think other breweries, other regional cask breweries the size of Timmy Taylor's could be seen as craft. But I think, given that they were part of this whole raise the taxes for small breweries...
Oh, he's edging it.
And I'm torn about it, but I think definitions need hard red lines. I'm going to try and write it down into like a sentence or two. Nice. I'm going to put that in the comments. I'm going to pin it, and I would love to hear your thoughts. Would you change it?
A manifesto, you say?
God, no, let's not go that far. Let me know your thoughts. Did we miss anything? Did we include something that you wouldn't? Are you so angry that a non-independent brewery could have fallen into our definition? I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I think that helps the industry come up with a definition. Yeah. And I also think it helps the consumer, because what's better to a consumer than to know that if you're drinking a craft beer, you're doing good for other craft breweries?
Exactly. It's the race to the top, not the race to the bottom,
Race to the top. There we go. So that's the first sentence. So yeah, that's our definition of craft. That is what we will be using on the Craft Beer channel, and kind of what we have without really knowing it. Comments below. Please do like and subscribe and check out. We've got lots of other utterly nerdy conversation pieces flashing up on screen in a couple of seconds' time that you can watch.